Good morning. So I think we can start, as we've already got a quorum. There are 3 items on the agenda today, and they are funding proposals from the administration. May I remind members that if they have any direct or indirect pecuniary interest in relation to any matter being discussed today, then please, according to Section 83A of the Rules of Procedure, declare the nature of the interest before speaking on the matter. And please, may I also draw your attention to Section 84 of the ROP on voting requirements in the event that members have direct pecuniary interest. So we have on our agenda item 1 PWSC number 3 Kai-Tak multi-purpose sports complex. So this is to upgrade part of 272RS to Cat A at an estimated cost of $62.7 million in MOD prices. On the 10th of January and on the 17th of February, the HA panel was consulted. Members had no objection to the submission of the funding proposal to PWSC. And upon members' request, the administration provided supplementary information to the panel on the 9th of May 2014. And the panel's deliberations have been tabled. And now may I call upon Mr. McKinney to take us through the item.
Good morning. The multi-purpose sports complex project at Kai-Tak is intended to provide high-quality multi-purpose sports and recreation venues for the Hong Kong people, including a main stadium, a public sports ground and an indoor sports centre. These facilities will not only provide new venues for hosting major sports events, but will also increase the provision of public sports facilities. The complex will also have office and commercial space, an extensive open space and park features. And as well as providing a much-needed boost to Hong Kong's sporting infrastructure, the project will also play a major part in the regeneration and revitalisation of East Kowloon. After a considerable amount of time spent on planning this project, we are now in a position to invite members of this subcommittee to recommend to the Finance Committee the upgrading of a part of 272RS to allow us to start pre-construction work on this project. The estimated cost of this work is $62.7 million in money of the day prices. The proposed pre-construction work, very briefly, include a technical services consultancy, a quantity surveying consultancy, ground investigation, utility mapping, topographic and tree surveys. As with other major works projects, we need to carry out pre-construction work in order to ensure that the key technical and planning considerations related to the project are clearly identified and resolved prior to going to the tendering and construction stages. As the Chairman noted just now, we have regularly briefed the LegCo panel on Home Affairs on this project, most recently on the 6th of February this year. The panel supported proceeding with the project and putting forward this funding application to the Public Works Subcommittee for consideration. We have also maintained close consultation with stakeholders in the sports community, as well as the district councils, in particular in East Kowloon, Kowloon City, Wong Tai Sin and Kwun Tong, and also the Harbourfront Commission's Kai-Tak Task Force. All of these stakeholders have supported the project and asked that we make an early start with this. Subject to the funding approval of the LegCo Finance Committee, we plan to commence the pre-construction work in the 2nd or 3rd quarter of 2015 for completion in early 2017. Chairman, my colleagues and I would be very happy to address any concerns that members may wish to raise.
Thank you, Deputy Secretary. 我而家開放呢個項目呢，係俾大家提問嘅。
So members can now ask questions. Mr. Leung Kwok Hong. Good morning, Chairman. Good morning. I have no confidence in C.Y. Leung, and that's why I have no confidence in the C.Y. Leung administration. I have no confidence in what C.Y. Leung says. The C.Y. Leung government merely continues with the work of the Donald Tsang government, and I have no confidence. Now, I have got one question. In the original design of the Kai-Tak multi-purpose sports complex, initially there weren't too many residential units there. Mr. Leung, is that your constituency? No. My constituency is in the adjacent area, but also that's not your problem. Of course, I'm concerned about the entire territory, says the chairman. Now, when I get up and go to work every day in the morning, I see a lot of people there trying to get on public transport. And this MPSC will draw more people to the area. Now, we are always talking about building more roads and so on and so forth. So concerning this MPSC, in the initial stage, there weren't too many people living in the area. But now you see there is Kai Ching Estate, and the population in the estate is huge. So what can you do to cope with the traffic and transport problem? That's the first question. And second, I must say again that I have little confidence in this. This paper doesn't say anything about the area of this MPSC. Is it 28 hectares? Previously, we were told that the area will be 28 hectares. Can you give us an updated figure? I'll give you time to answer. Deputy Secretary.
Very quickly on the second point raised by the Honourable Member, the area remains at about 28 hectares for the development of this complex as a whole. In respect of the first question, and in particular in regard to the traffic considerations, the transportation considerations, the new complex will be well served by the new MTRC link, which is going to go from Sha Tin to Central. There will be 2 MTRC stations within approximately 800 metres of the complex, one at the future Kai Tak station and one at the future Seung Wong Toi station. We have done extensive preliminary modelling on the people flow on the assumption that the events at the main stadium in the complex would draw a capacity crowd of 50,000 people. And we have actually planned the existing indicative layout of the complex to ensure that these people can be effectively dispersed, mostly towards the 2 MTR stations. Our assumption is that roughly 80% of a crowd of 50,000 going to a major event, be it a concert or a sporting event, would use the 2 MTR stations either to travel north back towards the new territories or towards the rest of Kowloon and Hong Kong Island. We are not providing for very extensive car or coach parking as part of this project. Our intention is that this should be a project that is mainly accessible on foot very easily for most people. We are aware of the traffic issues, and this is something that has been raised in particular by the district councils in the area. However, I believe they were fairly satisfied with the response that we gave them.
Mr. Leung.
Well, this is just an estimate. Have you learned the experience from the airport railway? Now they say that if there is an increase in passenger, there will be an increase in passenger for the aeroplanes. There will be more people using the railway to the airport. But it seems that their forecast is wrong. Now we have to pay that airport railway, and we have subsidized that.
Quickly answer that we are in constant consultation with the MTRC on this project, and we have also been engaging with them on the detailed station design for the 2 stations closest to the complex, because we are aware that this is an issue. Although I would think there are perhaps not direct comparisons with the airport, it is something that we will take into consideration.
Next, Mr. Wong Kwok Hing. Thank you, Chairman. Concerning the MPSC, I fully support the proposal in the paper. And the administration has already consulted the relevant district councils, the sports community, the sports groups. The previous term, or the term before the previous term, governments wanted to organize large-scale sports events, but they faced the Waterloo. They failed. The people criticized the government for the lack of long-term planning in respect of major sports facilities. There aren't enough such supporting facilities. And on such grounds, people oppose the administration for organizing major international sports events. I think you still have such recollections. Finally, the administration has accepted the Council's view, the Council's view, and has also considered the view of the sports community and has embarked on the planning of a major sports facility. On this piece of good site, the airport has been relocated. There is enough space for the administration to build a major sports complex. This is in line with the wish of the public. This is also in response to the demand of this council. This is not just a matter of this particular district. This is a matter for the whole territory, for the whole people of Hong Kong, and it is therefore worth supporting. Some who want to oppose the government will oppose for opposition's sake. They have no confidence in the government. They belong to the opposition. Therefore, I fully support the proposal in the paper. There is no need to give any answer to me.
Sir, Mr. McKinney. 下一位易志明議員。
Next, Mr. Frankie Yik. Well, I'm concerned about the dispersal of the spectators. The Deputy Secretary has answered the question. I have looked at the reply. It's estimated that about 80% of the spectators will take the MTR, as said by the Deputy Secretary. Within 30 minutes, it's estimated that they can leave the stadium and arrive at the MTR station. They arrive at the MTR station doesn't mean that they can get on the train. Assuming that you work 15 minutes, then say 800 meters, and one train will take 2,500 people in the evening. Unless there is any special arrangement, you have to wait for 3 or 4 minutes for a train. The last one to get on the train will have to wait for at least 1 hour. I want to clarify this. Say, if I'm the last one to leave the stadium, then after about half an hour, arrive at the MTR station, but I have to wait for at least 45 minutes to get on the train. Apart from the MTR, I know you don't want to provide many car parking spaces, but are there any public transport interchanges so that other means of public transport, such as buses and minibuses, to help dispersing the spectators?
The investigations that I referred to just now in terms of the crowd dispersal, of course, at this stage are of quite a preliminary nature. One of the reasons we're here today is seeking funding for the detailed pre-construction consultancies on technical and operational issues. And these consultancies will go into far greater detail on the exact mechanics of how the people will move from the main stadium in particular to the 2 MTR stations. However, the preliminary work we've done does show that with the indicative layout that we have, in particular with the podium structure that we're using for the easy pedestrian access to the stations, we are fairly confident that at least from our initial studies we can achieve those aims. In terms of the other transportation infrastructure, perhaps I can ask my colleague just to very briefly explain what the other options are for people coming to and from the main complex.
So who would like to speak? Yes, Ms. Linda Law. Thank you, Mr. Yik, for the question. And well, let me speak on the MTR. We have close communication with the MTRC as for the frequency and the length of the number of cars of the MTR trains. The MTRC said that they would make special arrangements for big events, say, for example, during the racing during racing time, during when there is the Lunar New Year football, they can disperse the crowd within a short period of time. And next to the MTR station, about 50 minutes, there is a public transport interchange for buses and minibuses. And they are now under planning. This public transport interchange will enable the provision of other means of public transport for the dispersal of the crowd. Ms. Yik, thank you for the information. Now you are seeking funds for planning and also for detailed design. I hope that in the future you can provide more information concerning these arrangements in respect of public transport. And please spell out how many minutes can people get on the train after they left the stadium. You also expect that there will be other means of public transport. But what if there is none? My concern is how early can people get on the train? After they get on the train, that's not your business anymore. If you allow, then I want to ask another question. It's a question for the Development Bureau. I'm concerned about the more than 1,000 car parking spaces. There are about 600 to 700 coach parking spaces. In Hong Kong, there is no policy of providing coach parking spaces for these tourist coaches. And after the the coach parking spaces are gone, I don't know where will these coaches go.
Chairman, I'd be very happy as soon as we have more detailed information on the dispersal and the transport arrangements. I would be very happy to share it with members of this committee or with the council as a whole.
To
put on record, I want to ask. Now, just now, Mr. Yik asked whether, in terms of the special of the crowd, will your funding cover the study of the special of the crowd? Will the Deputy Secretary help us whether under 3A, B, C, and D, paragraphs 3A, B, C, and D, which part covers the study on the dispersal of crowds?
Clarify that point. The actual transportation issues are being dealt with under a different consultancy which is already underway. And so the results of that should be available well before we actually start the pre-construction work and the technical consultancy. And as I said, I would be very happy to share the detailed information that comes out from that work.
The Deputy Secretary may, after the meeting, provide written information to us. Next, Mr. Chung, Christopher Chung. We support the proposal. The sports community is of the view that the facilities are much needed. They think that this sports complex is not big enough. It's a much smaller one. We should be more far-sighted. There should be more possibility for the expansion of the MPSC. Say, for example, the park on the runway and also Song Wong Tai Park, can they be taken into account for future possibility of expansion of the MPSC? So that there can be synergy. And can the Metropolitan Park be designed in such a way that in the future, if the MPSC needs expansion, the MPSC can expand into the Metropolitan Park or can be turned into a so-called sports park. And I also hope that there can be flexibility. Within the MPSC, there can be some temporary venues. Say, for example, for diving, for short distance swimming, can some temporary facilities be provided, and if you want to provide temporary facilities, you need space available. And such space can be used for temporary, putting up a temporary venue. Now it is facing the waterfront. Can there be water sports conducted in the future? And as for the transport issue, you will build tunnels. I don't know whether you will uplift the whole MPSC. In fact, there can be a basement car park which can accommodate buses to pick up and set down passengers in the basement.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah. In terms of the usage of the venue, our assumption is that given the fact that there is already and will continue to be, without this venue, a shortage of public sports venues in East Kowloon, certainly we anticipate that the public sports ground and the indoor sports facilities, as well as the outdoor sports and recreational facilities that will be developed as part of this complex, will be extremely well used. Current usage rates for these kind of facilities in that area are 100% for sports grounds, in the 90% for the indoor facilities. So we see that there is a need and that there will be a very high level of usage. There is indeed, within the site as a whole, as I said just now, it's a 28-hectare site. There will be considerable areas that are open and that will be suitable for use for temporary venues, whether for sport or recreation or even arts or cultural type events. So these kind of events would be able to take place in temporary venues. They can also, of course, take place in the main venues, as the main venues will be designed in such a manner as to anticipate multi-purpose use as far as possible.
Chairman, has he considered developing Tsuen Wan Toi Park as well?
Wong Toi Park somehow be incorporated into the project so that it can be used together.
Sorry, yes, thank you very much, Chairman. Yes, the Tsuen Wan Toi Park will actually be a separate PWSC item. However, it will be immediately adjacent to the sports complex. And our intention is that both the Tsuen Wan Toi Park and the Station Square Park, which will be another open space project in Kai Tak, would have a seamless connection. In other words, there wouldn't be a fence or a barrier. They would lead into each other. So there would be a lot of interface between these facilities. Thank you.
Next, Mr. Wu Chi-wai. Thank you, Chairman. They are applying funds to conduct a study. Of course, you have to do it. But I want to raise several points here. With regard to the scope of the study, now will you take into account the Coliseum, the Hong Kong Stadium, and also this MPSC? Will you conduct a study on their positioning, and also on their uses or land use?
You know, Hong Kong is such a small place. And we're going to have the MPSC, the stadium, Hong Kong Stadium, and the Hong Kong Coliseum, and it's really quite unimaginable. So I think you need to tell the public what you are going to do with the Hong Kong Coliseum and the Hong Kong Stadium. Will you do the planning again for the two sites? And then second, concerning the promotion of elite sports. This is of course important, but I think at the same time you have to try to popularize sports for all. The LCSD spends over $3 billion a year on promoting sports for all, and every year we have less than 6 million people making use of LCSD sports venues. So I think it's important that you try to promote the culture of sports in Hong Kong. There is going to be a very big stadium, and I hope that it won't be used exclusively for holding concerts. Although I do understand that the stadium will be used for sports activities as well as other types of activities. And then how can you make sure that the utilization rate of the main stadium will be high? And for activities which need to be held in the main stadium, can they in the interim be held in the Hong Kong Stadium? So these are my 3 questions. Thank you, Chairman. Deputy Secretary.
These are actually very, very good points. In relation to the first point, with the Hong Kong Coliseum, we do not really anticipate that the future sports complex will have a venue that is comparable to that. The Coliseum currently provides a capacity of 10 to 12,000 seats in an indoor environment for sports and largely also for entertainment events. And we do not really see anything within the sports complex that will take the place of that. However, the question about the current Hong Kong Stadium is very pertinent indeed. We have previously, in earlier consultancy studies on the financing of the new complex, looked at the issue of the Hong Kong Stadium. And the Secretary for Home Affairs previously at the HA panel, at the Home Affairs panel, has stated that it would be unlikely that the Hong Kong Stadium would be able to retain its current scale once the new project is built, particularly as the sports complex will have a 50,000 plus seat new stadium with a retractable roof. We do, however, feel that from a sporting perspective there is a reason and a logic for maintaining the current site of the Hong Kong Stadium as a sports venue, albeit a venue that would be more for community sports use for schools and for local sports associations rather than being a major event venue. If I can very quickly address the 2 points, Chairman. In terms of the promotion of community sport as opposed to just focusing on elite sport, we feel that this venue will play a major part in helping to boost community sports promotion, particularly in the East Kowloon area, where there is a shortage of venues, particularly sports grounds and indoor sports venues, when compared to the planning standards and guidelines that the area should have. I do recognise that with fewer than 6 million people recorded as using LCSD facilities, this seems like a low number, but in fact the usage rates of the facilities run by LCSD are very, very high. As I said earlier, for sports grounds and football pitches, they're around 100% in terms of the available usage rate. For indoor sports centres, they're very commonly above 90%. So in fact, there's a large amount of use. I think the issue is more with a shortage of facilities rather than necessarily a shortage of participation per se. And just finally, in terms of the event profile for the sports complex, again, it's early days. We're probably 6 years away from seeing the complex open. And of course, at this stage, we could not really design a complete event profile as such. However, in the early planning stages, we've already looked at the future finance and management of the stadium. And at that stage, our consultants identified 41 different types of event that could be held at the 3 main venues of the complex itself. In particular, for the main stadium, there are events such as obviously entertainment concerts and cultural events, events such as shows, exhibitions, fairs and carnivals that could be held in that large open space with the potential for being covered. These events cannot really currently be held at the Hong Kong Stadium due to site limitations, due to the limitations of the surface of the stadium, and also due to the fact there is no way of covering that ground. So the new stadium at Kai Tak will be able to provide scope for a lot more different types of event than the current stadium at So Kon Poo. Thank you, Chairman.
Next, Mr. Chen Chi-chun. Thank you. I agree that we should have more sports facilities in Hong Kong. But it doesn't mean that I have to support the construction of the MPSC. Even if I do not object to carrying out a study for the MPSC, it doesn't mean that I have no reservations about this whole project. Now, some members say that they fully support the idea, they have no reservations, they have no questions. But then I want to say that for this paper, it lacks substance. Now, the the government wants us to approve $62 million. But I think the content of this paper is very weak. Very little information is contained in this paper. The Home Affairs panel had no objection to the submission of the item to the PWSC, but I note that panel members did raise a lot of questions. Perhaps you can look at this brief. Procurement, financing, HA panel members expressed worries. They were worried about overspending. They were worried about escalation of costs. They were worried about the completion date. And in fact, this paper doesn't even tell us the area of the MPSC. It was only when the Deputy Secretary was asked this question by Mr. Leung Kwok Hong that he said that it would be 28 hectares. What about the total cost of this entire project? We don't know. This figure cannot be found in the paper. We are concerned about overspending. Look at West Kowloon. Initially, no one objected to having a cultural district in West Kowloon, but now we really do not know what the ultimate figure will be for the completion of the project. We are not even talking about cost effectiveness or economic effectiveness. We just want to know what the ultimate cost will be. What's going to be the final bill? So for the MPSC, now you're asking for $62 million, but once we've given you this amount, we may have to continue to support your further funding proposals. So please respond to this question first.
In terms of the budget for the future construction of the sports complex, clearly this is something that will come out of the consultancies and the technical work and the pre-construction work that we are currently seeking funding for through this item. We have, however, previously at the Home Affairs panel referred to an indicative budget for the entire project based on the original 2010 technical feasibility study scope of approximately $25 billion. And I believe that figure has also been mentioned in the media. However, that is purely a preliminary figure that we have given for the purposes of making an initial illustration to give people an idea of the scale and scope of this project. Clearly, we need to do the pre-construction work, in particular the detailed quantity surveying and technical work, and also look at the future operating parameters of this complex before we will be able to come up with a full and final estimate for this project. When we come back to this subcommittee sometime in the next 18 months to 2 years to ask for the full funding for the MPSC project at Kai Tak, then we will have a much firmer budgetary figure based on the work that we've done through the pre-construction work and this consultancy. And Chairman, I assure members that we are just as concerned about the budget for this project. We do not want to see it go over budget. We do not want to see the construction budget for this project affect the way in which it is operated in the future, which is key to the success of the project.
Mr. Chen, we're not talking about overspending at this stage. The problem is we don't know what the ultimate figure is going to be. Why is it that the figure 25 billion is not included in this paper? Why is it that we can't find 25 billion in this paper? So when I go into the hairdressers or the barber's shop, I don't know what the final bill will be, but you asked me to wash my hair first. Mr. Kenneth Chen, Chairman, the government is applying for about $62 million for the pre-construction works for the MPSC. They need to carry out technical services, consultancy, quantity surveying, consultancy, ground investigation, utility mapping, and topographic and tree surveys. Now, unless we say that we do not support the development of hardware, sports hardware in the Kai Tak area. Otherwise, I don't see why we can reject this application for about $62 million for pre-construction works. But, Chairman, many people like me are concerned about sports policy in Hong Kong. We, of course, hope to see sports being promoted by the government, but, you know, things do go wrong, although we all have good intentions. Look at the Hong Kong Stadium. There are many problems, not enough sunlight, and as a result, the grass can't grow well. So, in fact, the Hong Kong Stadium is really a scandal. I don't think it's responsible for the government to blame the sun and the rain and the weather. So, I think you really have to remember the painful experience of the Hong Kong Stadium. Please do not just do some simple computer modeling and then tell us that everything will be all right. The Hong Kong Stadium is really a big problem. And then cycling grounds. Now, I believe there were consultancies, surveying consultancies, and you know, there are so many problems. And then the elitists, the elite athletes are saying that the venues are not good enough. So who should be held accountable? Government officials or the consultants? And I can ask our government officials whether they do have the necessary expertise and training to supervise the consultants and their work. No, a lot of money and resources and time were spent on venues like the cycling ground, and the cycling ground was intended for elite athletes, and we do not want these venues to become recreation grounds only. And we really do not have enough confidence in the government because of its poor track record. So how can you make sure that on this occasion we're not going to see these problems, we're not going to have another big scandal? How can you assure us that you will remember all the painful experience, and how can you instill confidence in us that things will not go wrong again? Deputy Secretary.
And these are certainly something that we're very appraised of. Large sporting infrastructure, whether it's in Hong Kong or elsewhere in the world, does have a record of things going wrong. We're aware, for example, of Wembley Stadium having to resurface their pitch 13 times after it was first opened. The recently opened Singapore Sports Hub has had well-documented issues and teething troubles with opening. We're aware not only of problems that have happened with major sports venues in Hong Kong, but also overseas, and clearly we need to learn from that experience, particularly when looking at the key aspects of the major venues. In terms of the ability of the government team and our consultants to oversee the work, I think we have developed a fairly large reservoir of expertise within the government itself in terms of the management of the architectural and also the leisure management. However, we do recognise that that needs to be augmented, and we have already tendered for an expert operations consultant who will come in and who will supervise the entire process of the technical and overseeing and management work throughout the design and detailed design and construction and early operation period of this complex, to ensure that we also have the best international expertise and experience to advise us on making sure that we have effective monitoring of this project.
陳宇，
我問下一輪，主席，因為時間唔夠。
Mr. Chen, I think I'll ask again in the next round. Mr. Michael Tian.
If this complex, after completion, can take sports to a totally different level in Hong Kong, I would have no hesitation in coming out and suggest we build a second one. So my main concern is what have we been doing with sports in Hong Kong with all the pledge made by government. First of all, I was once involved in that area. I was appointed by government, I forgot the name. It was a committee that I resigned the quickest because it was so damn political. It's incredible. It wasn't even about sports. Okay? It was about different interest groups fighting for different things. So anyway, my question is, we built the Coliseum. Supposedly the Chinese name is 體育館. I think in the last 4 years, it had only held 12 related events related to sports, and over 100 or 200 with entertainment. So that actually is not 體育館. It's 藝術館 or entertainment, right? How many nights on the average in the last few years was the Hong Kong Stadium used for sports? Do you have that figure?
Deputy Secretary?
Chairman, I don't have the figure specifically for sports events. Roughly,
half the time, a quarter of the time. There are 365 days, nights, okay, a year.
For the Hong Kong Stadium itself, there are roughly 30 event days per year. Approximately 80% of those, I think, are sports related.
Okay.
But I would have to come back with detailed
30 times
figures.
80, that's 24. So now I'm a bit confused. You have a Hong Kong Stadium now that seats, what, 30, 40,000? Okay. It was only able to attract these major events for 24 nights out of a year. The Coliseum attracted 10 events per year. So between these two, they attracted 30 some odd events in a year. Now we are building this 50,000 seat retractable roof stadium. I can't see how you can close the gap. I'm just curious, how many nights do you plan to be able to use this for sports, since this is what you intend to do in the first place?
Deputy Secretary?
Chairman, I mean, it's a very, very good question, and the utilisation rate of the Hong Kong...
I really can't help it. I wasn't going to ask, but
no,
I did some calculation. Yeah, please.
I'm happy to try and provide some clarification, and Ms. Law can provide some more detailed figures in a second. Yes, I mean, the utilisation rate of the Hong Kong Stadium, I think, is somewhat disappointing, and it is certainly below what was anticipated when the venue was rebuilt in 1994.
Okay. So why would this be better?
Well, I think the very simple answer to that, Chairman, is that the current stadium has severe limitations in terms of its ability to host a wide variety of different types.
Great, fantastic. Now I ask you the second question. How many applications have you received for the Hong Kong Stadium?
In terms of the usage of the stadium?
Right, for sports. None, because people were not happy with the other facilities, right? So you have reason to believe that if Hong Kong Stadium today facilities are upgraded, then you could fill that stadium with what, 60, 70, 80% a year? Really? Is there any documentation that we can see at LegCo to show that a lot of major sports events organizers are interested to come to Hong Kong Stadium, and the only reason they're not coming is because of facilities? Is there any evidence of that? That's my worry.
Chairman, it's a good question. I don't really have any hard evidence and figures on hand, but I'd be happy to look through and provide some. Because
otherwise, this is just a blind guess. Another 50,000-seater retractable roof. It sounds expensive, right? It's like a convertible Porsche, right? And what is the guarantee that it will be used? Is there anything at all that you have to show us to back up your plan? Or do you have any plan at all? I mean, let's talk about plan. Do you have any plan at all? Once completed, 50% of the time, 20% of the time, that will be used? for sports?
Deputy Secretary.
Certainly, Chairman, if I may sort of just dial this back a little bit, the primary purpose of the sports complex, which includes obviously the stadium and other facilities, is clearly to be a sports complex. However, we have to recognise that there is also scope for other events which currently do not take place in Hong Kong to be able to take place particularly at the main stadium, given that it will not suffer from the same limitations that the current Hong Kong stadium does. For example, and this is just one example, the famous pop musician Lady Gaga, she played in...
So in other words, what you planned for the 50,000-seater stadium is actually really not for sports. You actually have more confidence utilizing it for
Honourable
entertainment.
Tsuen, I think it is fairer for you to allow the Deputy Secretary to complete his answer. Deputy Secretary, please.
I was just giving the example of Lady Gaga, Chairman, which when
That's
she played...
what I was reckoning, yes.
Yes, when she played
on.
her concert in Seoul, in Korea, she played a concert in a 50,000-seat stadium. When she came to Hong Kong, she had to play 4 concerts in the Asia World Arena because there was no venue in which she could put on a stadium concert in Hong Kong. This is simply an example of the kind of event, and there are many other kinds of event that we feel are currently taking place in other cities, in Asia, in the Pacific, in the world, that would be able to use a major new facility of the type that we're planning for Kai Tak, but which are not able currently to use the Hong Kong Stadium. Obviously, we do not know how many people would have come if we had already developed that venue. However, it's almost certain to say that Lady Gaga's entourage did not try and book the Hong Kong Stadium, simply because there would have been no point in it.
But certainly, government doesn't consider Lady Gaga as being the sports business, right?
Chairman, as I said earlier, the main purpose of this complex is to provide for sports events, and the overwhelming majority of events we feel will be sporting events held in not just the main stadium but the other venues at the complex. However, we have to recognise that there are other types of event that Hong Kong people would enjoy that are capable of being held at that complex.
Mr. Chairman, I just have to make myself clear. The title of this complex is sports. So if the stadium is used mostly for sports, I don't mind if they throw Lady Gaga concerts, throughout the year. But if concerts took up 80% and sports only 20%, and government cannot give us any indication as to how many sporting events they have confidence to attract, then why don't we change the name of this? Anyway, that's only my comment.
Yeah.
All right?
Honourable Tsuen, I suppose you would have to wait until your second round to continue with this dialogue. Tsuen Kam-lam議員.
Mr. Chen Kam-lam, thank you, Chairman. We support building the MPSC in Kai Tak. Quite a lot of time during which large-scale major sports events were organized in other parts of the world. When Hong Kong sportsmen, sportswomen got medals, the people of Hong Kong were very encouraged and excited. Yet, they also criticized the government for not giving enough support to sports. And one major indication is the lack of sports policy and lack of sport facilities. The construction of a large stadium is a demand of the people of Hong Kong, and they have been looking forward to that. Every year we organize international sporting events, for example, football matches. People in Hong Kong like football matches, like to watch football matches. Such football matches are organized in the Hong Kong Stadium, but there is bad management of the turf, and the Hong Kong Stadium has become a laughingstock. Now, there is the lack of a suitable sports policy. Now, if we have a venue that is suitable for major international sports events, then we can put in more resources, we can put in more manpower and expertise. In the MPSC, there is a main venue and there are other supporting venues. The MPSC will provide better facilities for training of athletes. The issue has been discussed for a long time in the Home Affairs panel, and members support that proposal. We should not resort to one reason or another to block the passage of this proposal. With regard to the usage of the stadium can be used for sports events. The stadium is also a multi-purpose stadium. Now, the countries that organize Olympic Games also make use of their stadia to organize sports and other events. That's the right way of making good use of available resources. If we do not have a big stadium, then we will not have any venue for major events. If we want any international sports events to be held in Hong Kong, we can't do because we don't have a major stadium. When we were planning Kai Tak, the government gave the undertaking that there would be the MPSC in Kai Tak, and there is a strong call from the sports community for this MPSC. And in fact, this paper has been queuing for a very long time, and I fully support the proposal. Do you need any reply from the administration? No. Thank you. Next, Mr. Wu Chi-wai, your second round. Thank you, Chairman. We have no intention to block the study. This is only funding for the study. But I have the responsibility to ask this question. How can we improve our sports policy? If we are to build the MPSC, we are going to spend more than $20 billion. This is a big sum. If I just say that we will have a big venue and we can organize major international sports events, that's not a good answer. That is not what people expect. We want the MPSC to improve, to help improve community sports, to help popularize sports among the people of Hong Kong. Now, there is a shortage of facility. There is a shortage of sports facilities, according to the Deputy Secretary. Now, it's not about a problem of participation, sports participation. Now, in your study, can you confirm that the study will include what sort of facilities are needed so that we can improve the fitness of our people? You are going to spend about $20 billion. How are you going to improve sports participation, improve fitness of the people through this event, through this MPSC? Some studies show that the fitness of Hong Kong children are worse than the fitness of other Asian communities. In the future, will the sports center, will this MPSC be just a concert venue instead of a sports venue for a concert for Lady Gaga?
Yeah. You know, for the Hong Kong Coliseum, it's supposed to be a sports venue, and yet it's mainly used for holding concerts. And 10 years later, do you think there will be so many people coming to a Lady Gaga concert or a similar concert? You know, the world is changing very rapidly. Every day, we don't know what's going to happen in 10 years' time. But I think one thing is important, and that is you need to try to promote sports for all. So I want to ask you whether you've got a strategy to try to promote sports for all, especially children and young people, and you need to enhance the fitness of our young people. And after all, you're going to come to get an extra $20 billion for the complex.
In terms of the overall sports policy, I would like to make a couple of points, though, particularly in relation to this project and how they relate to sports policy. First, as we've said in the paper and as I've said a couple of times already here this morning, this is first and foremost a sports project. I don't want to get hung up on Lady Gaga. We've talked about her enough. This was simply an example of the other kinds of event that could be brought in. But first and foremost, this will be a sports project. The second very important point is that the main stadium is only a part of this project. In fact, the major usage of the future multi-sports complex at Kai Tak will be public usage. The public sports ground, which will meet a need, particularly in East Kowloon, for an additional public sports ground facility. The indoor sports centre, which will have 2 large arenas, and in addition other indoor sports centres, again, which will help the need for public sports facilities in East Kowloon. An extensive array of outdoor sports facilities and open space parkland, again, meeting the community needs. I do accept what you say about the issue of children in Hong Kong. As in many other places, having a problem with getting enough exercise and having the right physical condition. We will continue to spend the bulk of our budget allocated for sports development on the promotion of sport in the community, as we already do. Far by the greater part of our budget goes on promoting sport in the community through the organisation of sports programmes, through the management and development of venues. We do have an issue, as you've quite rightly pointed out, with the sufficiency of venues for promoting sport. There comes a point when you can promote sport as much as you like. If you don't have anywhere to play, it's not going to work. So we are very conscious of the need to extend the scope of the public sports venues. And I can guarantee that for the greater part of this complex in East Kowloon, these will be public sports facilities open for daily use by the public.
主席，唔好意思，其實我明白就係話，當然唔係秘書長自己。
Yes, I understand that the Deputy Secretary can't really answer the question on Hong Kong's overall sports policy. But then the government will be coming to us for a further $20 billion for the MPSC. And I'm sure the public would expect LegCo members to ask how the government is going to promote sports for all, especially children and young people. So can the HAB, together with the Education Bureau, prepare a paper for LegCo concerning how you're going to promote sports for all, especially for children and young people? And I think you shouldn't just be promoting the MPSC. You have to look at sports policy as a whole.
The promotion of sport and the promotion of sport in schools and the promotion of sport among young people is very much part of our policy objective. And clearly I recognise the need when we come back to this committee for the full funding for this project, be it 25 billion or whatever it turns out to be in terms of the final amount, we will need to give a very clear presentation on how this will help to serve the longer term and integrated policy needs for sports development. And I'm well aware of that. Thank you.
或者會議員都可以適切地喺民政事務委員會度。
And Mr. Wu, you can of course follow up in the HA panel on a regular basis. Mr. Kenneth Chen. Yes, Chairman. I wish to again mention the unsuccessful examples we had in the past, the Hong Kong Stadium and also the Velodrome in Cheung Kwan O. You know, maintenance is required only after 7 months of use. And so you can see that there are these problems, and the Deputy Secretary did admit that there were problems, and he has promised that the government will learn from experience and will make sure that there will be adequate manpower resources and expertise to oversee the pre-construction works, the various consultancy studies, and the overall planning. Before this item goes to the FC, I hope that we can get some information from the government as to what measures it proposes to adopt after it has learned from previous mistakes. That's the first point. Second, I understand that there is an EIA for this MPSC, and it is said that the EIA will be completed by the end of 2015. So you are going to hire a consultant to carry out the pre-construction works. And after the completion of the pre-construction works, will you do another EIA in the light of the outcome of these technical consultancies and quantity surveying consultancies, or do you think you don't need to do another EIA? So 2 questions in total.
I'll ask
Yes.
my colleagues from Architectural Services Department to deal with the technical issues and the environmental impact assessment, as they are monitoring that work. In regard to the misfortunes that have befallen various new sports facilities, be it in Hong Kong or anywhere else in the world, I'd be very happy to provide a couple of examples of areas where I think we need to be very aware that we don't make the same mistakes that have been made in other areas. I mentioned the case of Wembley, which is a documented fact. The Singapore Sports Hub obviously has had teething problems. There have been problems in stadiums in Australia where they didn't have a big enough pipe for the beer to come through during major games. These are all things that we need to think about. There are a myriad of examples. I'm sure every major sports facility has had its teething problems. What I'm prepared to do, Chairman, and would be very happy to do, is maybe provide a few examples where we have specifically taken note of in terms of referring to our future planning for this complex, in particular with regard to things like the surface, the height, the disposition of the site. I'd be very happy to provide a few examples, but this cannot be exhaustive. Thank you.
Thank you. EIA.
係咪請阿黃立輝
EIA Chairman, Mr. Wong? Yes, Chairman. Now, the main stadium of the MPSC is a designated project under the EIA ordinance. This we understand. And that's why we've hired a consultant to carry out an EIA study. We hope that the report will be available before the end of the year, and then the a report will be submitted to the EPD. Then concerning noise, visual impact, waste disposal, and also mitigation measures proposed. These will be considered by the EPD, and with the approval of the EPD, the mitigation measures will be included in the future contract. Mr. Chen. So we are asked to approve $62.7 million to study the laying of the pipes, the drains, and the and other details. And of course, these design features will affect the future impact on the residents, for example, noise, air, and so on and so forth. So, as you are now carrying out the pre-construction works, I want to know whether you're going to carry out another EIA, although this may not be necessary under the ordinance, because you have to look at the possible impact on the community. So, we will look at this study the parameters, and then we can compare the EIA report with the report of the pre-construction works. Thank you. Mr. Chen Chi-chun. Chairman, I wish to follow up on the cost. $25 billion was the estimate made in 2010, and we don't have an updated figure yet. So today, can you assure us that the final sum will not exceed, say, $30 billion or $40 billion? I really, although you are only asking for $62 million today for the pre-construction works, we want to have a rough idea of the final sum. Will it be, say, $50 billion? I'm not asking for an accurate assessment. But can you give us a rough estimate? Say no overspending or overspending by a maximum of 50% or what? Deputy Secretary.
When we have not even begun the pre-construction work, including the quantity surveying work, the site mapping, the utility mapping, the tree survey, the operations consultancy, it is simply not possible for me to commit to what I think the ultimate figure might be. It would simply be irresponsible and it would be guesswork on my part. We have previously simply said that our estimate based on the 2010 technical feasibility statement is in the order of $25 billion, and I can go no further than that today.
Mr. K.K. Kwok. But Chairman, I wish to follow up. Yes, Mr. Chen. So, so the $25 billion is merely your guess. Is that right? So the final sum may be 25 billion, 30 billion or more, but then this is only the construction cost, and you have to incur administrative costs. So what's the policy objective? We don't know your policy objective. We only know that it's better to have it than not to have it. We don't have enough facilities at the moment, and when the facilities are built and completed, they can be used, and they will be used. Yes, I understand that the government wants to host the Asian Games or even the Olympic Games, and without these venues, will not be able to host these international sports events, and so just build the facilities first. Just have them first. Just now, there was an exchange between Mr. Michael Tien and the government on the main stadium. Now, we don't know what the utilization rate of the main stadium is going to be. For the Hong Kong stadium, it's used only 30 days in a year, and 80% of the events are sports events, all right? But you're telling us we can't compare the Kai Tak stadium with the Hong Kong stadium. But then what about the main stadium? You mentioned Lady Gaga, 50,000 seats. I don't know how many concerts she can have in Hong Kong at a 50,000 seat stadium. Maybe Madonna, we can have a few concerts, but 6 years later Madonna will have retired. So how many singers can use this proposed main stadium for a concert? So maybe we can only fill this main stadium with rugby events or really major sports events. 50,000 seats. So, so can you please give a reply, Deputy Secretary?
Up in that statement, and I'll try and unpick it a little bit, but they're all very good points that the honourable member has made. In terms of the long-term administrative cost of running this complex, the proposed mode of operation for letting the contract will be a design, build and operate contract. So in fact, once the design and build have been taken care of, the future operating cost and revenue will be a matter for the future operating consortium, and this would not require, generally speaking, a further commitment of public funds for the day-to-day operation. In terms of bidding for the Asian or the Olympic Games, clearly this is not something that the government can do. This is the prerogative of the Sports Federation and Olympic Committee of Hong Kong, China, although if they were to bid, for example, for the Asian Games, they would in fact need the support of the government. However, we do not know at this stage whether or not the facilities we assume they would be are specifically what would be required to mount such a bid. There's a lot more than simply just building a big stadium that is required in hosting events of that nature. In terms of the wider sort of policy objectives that are connected with this project, we have in fact briefed the Home Affairs panel on several occasions on the sports policy issues related specifically to this project and in general. I do apologise to the member if we have not been clear enough in articulating these objectives. I'd be very happy to go over this again with him, but it's been made very clear in our previous submissions to the panel that we feel that this complex does help us to take forward our objectives for promoting sport in the community, for developing elite athletes, and for bringing more international sports events into Hong Kong, and as such is totally consonant with our policy for sports development. Thank you, Chairman.
Chairman has not answered my question concerning the cost effectiveness of the 50,000-seat stadium. How can that be cost effective? Okay, I give you the opportunity to answer that, Deputy Secretary. And then, Mr. Chen, you have the way for the third round.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'll ask my colleague, Ms. Law, to answer this question.
Principal Assistant Secretary.
What concert?
Earlier on, we conducted a preliminary consultancy study which looked into the three venues, including the usage rate of the main venue. In the consultancy study, there was a rough projection of the usage rate basing on the current sports situation and the current organization of major events in Asia. The trend is that what is the current situation? What is the current situation then? If I may be more specific, concerning the main stadium, with regard to the 20-odd events in the Hong Kong's organized in the Hong Kong Stadium, the new MPSC will house these events because there are more seats and there are better facilities in the MPSC. Say, for example, the Rugby 7 every year is bursting to the seams. How many of these 20-odd events have full house? Hong Kong Sevens had full house, and when there are overseas teams competing in Hong Kong. Well, I am a football fan. Mr. Chen, can she give us a paper? I think it is not a suitable place for you to cross-examine them. Maybe the PAS can provide a paper in response to Mr. Chen's question. In fact, Mr. Michael Tian has asked a similar question. Deputy Secretary.
Is that available?
Yes, we'd be happy to provide some more detailed figures on the events that have completely filled the Hong Kong Stadium and other venues to capacity, say, in the last 3 years. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah. I hope, Deputy Secretary, you would have appreciated by now that the PWSC is worried about taking a leap in the dark. And having taken the first leap, it may be a leap of no return. 郭家麒議員。
主席 Dr. K.K. Kwok, $25 billion. That's astronomical. I don't understand the justification for spending $25 billion on the MPSC. Of course, they can hide behind the consultants. I believe the government does have the sums. We are asking for an indoor sports, indoor recreation hall, a small football pitch. We have been waiting for years after years, but we have none. And yet they are going to spend $25 billion on the MPSC. When the proposal was first made, it was a time for somebody had a fever and wanted to bid for the Asian Games. And therefore somebody proposed to have the MPSC in Kai Tak. I hope the government have already got out of that fever. I think that's really a mockery for those who want to promote sports. Our elite sports women sportsmen, after their prime dates, they will have to leave, and they cannot compete with the imported athletes. If the government wants to get medals for Hong Kong, they can import second line, third line athletes from the mainland. Now, for local athletes, they don't have any place to practice, and children don't have a football pitch. They're going to spend $25 billion on the MPSC. How many big events? I've only heard Rugby 7 and nothing else. If you call it a sports event, okay, but it is also a tourist attraction, a tourist event. The Rugby Association has a lot of money for community education. Even grassroots children, children from grassroots families are able to join rugby training classes. But that's not for the people. Now, you have the Phoenix scheme, but you don't have any local football matches that can fill the stadium. There is no sports events in Hong Kong. There are not enough sports events in Hong Kong that can support this big venue. And you want mega events, therefore you can have concerts. It seems that mega events can solve the problem, but the mega events cannot solve the problem of sports. The Secretary for Education came to us. We asked for a few more sports lessons or PE lessons for our students, but he cannot say anything on that. The physical fitness of our children are the worst in Asia. And now you don't have money, you don't have resources for improving sports for our children, but you're going to spend $25 billion on the MPSC. That's really a joke. We know that you're just trying to make yourself look better. But you're really mean for the poor people of Hong Kong. $25 billion can build 5 or 6 hospitals. $25 billion can build many homes for the elderly. And there can be more community sports facilities in the community, but the government refuses to give money into that. Ms. Chen Yunhan. Well, I have been following this issue for a very long time. The airport has been relocated for more than 20 years. I've participated in the discussion of the MPSC at the start. I had the query why the stadium should be so big. I talked to those in Wong Tai Sin, To Kwa Wan, Kowloon City. They support this because they lack a big sports venue. I question whether they need such a big one. Mr. Falk was still a LegCo member, and he spoke a lot. I heard the comments of the elite sports athletes. I think there's a need for a big venue. I am also involved in the planning of redevelopment of the ex-Kai-Tak site. We went through many rounds of consultation. We heard a lot of local views. They feel that they need such a big stadium. Therefore, it is worth supporting. Well, it seems that you're not going to allow people to link the cycling track with the MPSC. I think there was a proposal that in the future there will be a sports town in the 13 streets. The MPSC should be linked to other parts of East Kowloon. It is expected that there will be pedestrian links. and also the link of and the link provided by cycling tracks. And we've also asked for parking spaces, and we also asked for provision of a breezeway, so that there will be so that the air ventilation in Kowloon City will not be adversely affected. The issue was discussed with the district councils many times before, and the scheme should be supported. When the government proposed to build more residential blocks near the MPSC, I already reminded the administration that it would cause a ventilation problem with the vicinity districts. Now, there are a lot of people who support this proposal. They live in the area. They have made a number of suggestions. I fully support this. But now we want a cycling track linking the MPSC. Now, will there be a cycling track linking the MPSC? This is first question. And I also want to know more about pedestrian links with the MPSC. Now, there is also the discovery of the Longjin River, and also there is also the suggestion of a tunnel linking with the relics. In fact, in To Kwa Wan, Pak Tai Street and Nam Kok Road near Kowloon City, originally there was a tunnel linking with Pak Tai Street, but there may be a lot of relics. I hope that you will not repeat the mistakes of the express rail. They discovered a lot of relics when they conduct the works. My question is about the cycling tracks and also the discovery. What about the discovery of relics, and how you're going to deal with that? The Deputy Secretary.
Quickly, in response to the two questions, the cycle track, which is linking up East Kowloon as a whole, will go through the site of the future sports complex. In fact, in the indicative layout plan that's attached to the paper, it may not be very clear, but we have actually shown an alignment for the cycle track which will go through the complex and which will be connected up with the entire cycling network in Kai Tak. And we're working with the colleagues in charge of the overall Kai Tak development to make sure that that will work as a connected up cycle track in the area. In terms of the antiquities, we are at this stage quite confident that within the site for this particular sports complex there appear to be no antiquities at all. You're quite right in saying that in other areas of Kai Tak there have been a large number of relics, some of them of great historical value found, but certainly within the site for this project we are not aware of anything similar. Thank you.
主席，
Hi.
我
Chairman, I still want to stress this point concerning the cycling track or cycle track. Now, there is a link with To Kwa Wan, there's a link with Tong Tau, and link with Ngau Tau Kok, and link with Kwun Tong. But the link with Kwun Tong has not been finalized. I just want to make sure that there will be people will be allowed to cycle all the way to the MPSC. I hope that can be confirmed.
Intention is that there should be seamless access into and out of the site for pedestrians and for cycles, no fees charged, no blocks at all. It should be a steady and continuous route for cyclists and pedestrians alike through the site, whether from To Kwa Wan side, from Kowloon City side, or from the Wong Tai Sin side.
我想問呢，單車徑嗰度呢，頭同尾會有啲好似。
And you know, in Taiwan, in the mainland, in Japan, you know, there are storage facilities at both ends of the cycling track. So people can go to work. They could cycle to work, and then they can store their things at both ends of the cycling track. All right, Deputy Secretary.
The cycling networks in Japan, in Taiwan, very, very successful. The overall design of the cycling network throughout Kai Tak is a matter for the Civil Engineering Development Department. However, within the site that we are seeking the funding for today, there will be space, certainly, for providing the parking areas for rental bicycles if that is what is required. There would certainly be enough space to do that.
Okay.
Mr. James Toh. Yes, Chairman. Having heard the discussion, I am worried that this is going to become a white elephant. Ms. Chen Yunhan said that the residents in the area supported the construction of the MPSC. But I don't think the residents need a 50,000 seat stadium. I think the residents need smaller venues all over the territory. So we should look at the suitable size of the stadium. And according to your assessment, will there be many sports events which require or need a stadium with 50,000 seats? How many days a year? I just want a rough estimate. Just tell me what you think. And then, how many days in a year will there be concerts which must be held in a 50,000 seat stadium? For example, concerts with an audience size of 15,000 to 50,000. How many days in a year? Now I think if the DAB AGM is held, there are more than 15,000 people, and so they need such a stadium. And if there is to be a plenary meeting of the Chinese Communist Party in Hong Kong, then again, I think a 50,000 seat stadium is required. So can you tell me your estimate? How many events will need a 50,000 seat stadium? Or is it that you need the $62 million so that you can do the assessment?
Times in our presentations to the Home Affairs panel, and that is that the MPSC, the multi-purpose sports complex at Kai Tak, is not simply about building a single 50,000 seat main stadium. It is in fact about building a whole suite of sports facilities, the great majority of which will be public sports facilities open to the public 7 days a week, 365 days a year. The main stadium is one of the components of this sports complex, albeit a very major component. As regards the events that would take place in the main stadium itself, clearly, I'm sure many people are aware that in the past the current Hong Kong stadium has been unable to meet the demand for tickets for many major events, primarily international rugby and football events that have taken place. And this has led obviously to problems such as ticket touting and scalping and to increases in prices and many people not being able to get in to see the events. Equally, many of the events that are held at the current Hong Kong Stadium are held there because the stadium is the only venue that meets the international sports requirements, not just in terms of the capacity of the ground, but in terms of the backup and support services. And even at this level, it is not sufficient for some types of major event. So in addition to providing the additional seating capacity, the proposed main stadium at the complex in Kai Tak would also have the additional features that we would need to be able to host a wider range of international events, We would certainly, as we've undertaken earlier this morning, Chairman, be prepared to provide more detailed figures on the actual events at the current Hong Kong Stadium that have attracted full crowds of 40,000 people, and also the crowds that have attended other events at the stadium in, say, the last 3 years. We'd be very happy to provide this. But just one more clarification, Chairman. We have to plan on the basis of the peak demand for the facility, just as you do for any other facility. There will be times when there will be events that will be held at the new main stadium, as with the current Hong Kong Stadium, where you will not fill all the seats. You may have 20,000 people, you may have just 10,000 people come. But we need to also plan for those times when there will be demand for 50,000 tickets, events that Hong Kong people really want to see, and which currently they are not able to see, given the lack of sports infrastructure that we have.
主席，我正正嘅問題就係咧，我都話當啊，我當咧。
Mr. James Toh. So let's assume that for some events, the audience size is 15,000, some 20,000, some 50,000. So can you tell me how many days in a year Hong Kong will need such a big stadium? 20 days a year, 30 days a year, or 80 days a year? Now, even if you tell me that there are only 5 days in a year that we need a 50,000 seat stadium, it doesn't mean that I will oppose the idea of constructing the stadium. But then we'll have to be prepared that there will only be 5 days when Hong Kong will need such a stadium. So we just want to know what's going to happen. When LegCo members are asked to approve funding, we have to have all the information.
In the follow-up document that you have promised, you would provide these information. Is that right?
Chairman, that is absolutely correct. And rather than speculate, which I don't feel very comfortable doing at all, I'd prefer to provide hard evidence of events where there have been documented numbers of people going to events, both in Hong Kong and similar events in neighbouring cities in Asia, if that would help to provide additional clarification.
Okay. Tsuen議員。
All right, Mr. Albert Chan. Chairman, in fact, I have been listening to the discussion for an hour. We're talking about an area of 28 hectares and a total sum of over $25 billion. And I can tell you that this paper is extremely weak in content. I think it's really lacking in information. And I don't know why members think that they can give full support. Now, in 2020, the estimated cost was 25 billion, and so I believe when this complex is completed in 2018, the bill will be at least $50 billion. This is because construction costs have been escalating. And then now we don't have this project sum in the paper. Second, we do not know what events will be held. The Deputy Secretary merely said rugby, football. Do you know that the development of football has been on the decline in Hong Kong? If there is no reforming of the KFA, football will not have any future in Hong Kong. So I think this venue is only going to be a performance venue, a concert venue. Do it in West Kowloon, not here. And then land use. Let's assume a plot ratio of 9. So we can build 45,600 square foot flats on this site, and this is double the number of flats that can be built every year. C.Y. Leung keeps saying that the government wants to provide more flats. You know, the government went to war with Baptist University for a site which can accommodate 800 flats, and for this site you can build thousands of flats on this site. I think you remember that when when Tong Chi-Hwa wanted to become the CE, he promised Timothy Falk that this site would be used for the building of a multi-purpose sports complex. Do you remember that? Chen Yun-han described the project as a project for Wong Tai Sin Kwun Tong. No, this is a territory-wide project. This is not a district project. In fact, I have always objected to the putting of the proposed complex in Kai Tak. Kai Tak is the last huge site we have in the urban area, 28 hectares. It's going to cost us $50 billion, and we haven't got the administrative costs yet. Look at what planning mistakes the Hong Kong government committed in the past decade or two. The express rail link is going to be a low-speed rail link. And then look at the cruise terminal. It is rarely used. The West Kowloon Cultural District has been delayed for over a decade. And then we have a problem providing the link for the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge. So concerning the concept, the use of the site, cost effectiveness, and also promotion of sports and sports development in Hong Kong, nothing is mentioned about these in the paper. And how come some members say that they wholeheartedly support the paper? I oppose this paper. So Chairman, I'll queue up again. Don't think that this paper can be passed today. Mr. Leung Po Hong. I want to tell you that in fact there are no sports events with 50,000 spectators. This year during the Lunar New Year, there were only 10,000 people going to the Lunar New Year soccer match. And in fact, many complimentary tickets were distributed to people. I want to say that I think only a rock concert can attract 50,000 spectators. But then it seems that Hong Kong doesn't really want too many overseas visitors. Now, there was a film about Chile. In 1973, there was a political movement, and there were many political prisoners, and the San Diego stadium was used to imprison all the political prisoners. So maybe in future, people can occupy Kowloon East instead of Central. And also maybe C.Y. Leung can organize a rally for the Patriotic Youth Corps, and they can all shout Heil Hitler there. This is going to be another white elephant. For this project, it's going to be nothing but a toy. Will you buy a house and live there for only 2 hours a year, and meanwhile you have to pay for the electricity bills and the other utilities? Of course not. You are paid by public money, government officials. You know, this is a reward promised by C.H. Tong to the sports sector. And then look at Disneyland. Over $20 billion was used for reclamation, and there are many hectares of land. And the Shanghai Disneyland is going to be commissioned soon. We have too many white elephants in Hong Kong. I mentioned the airport railway, the airport express. You have to take into account the opportunity cost. In East Kowloon, we need more PRH flats. We need more residential homes for the elderly. We need a dental center, or we also need or we may need a hospital for sports for the injured sports athletes. You know, in the Netherlands, they're doing very well. So why is it that we need this 50,000 seat stadium? It has to be maintained, and repair works are required.
坐20萬一個冧啊，成日都1950年起咗嚟做世界盃嗰個決賽場地，而家唔係 A 看台冧就 B 看台冧，唔係 B 看台冧就 C 看台冧。喂，即係我覺得，如果大家覺得可以忍心咁俾錢出去嘅，咁我就冇嘢講啊。而家我哋講緊啊，救下嗰啲五無人士啊，都話冇錢啊，佢有機會去嗰度咩？
Do they have a chance? Do the poor have a chance to make use of the MPSC to be spectators? I want to ask, what is your question? I want to ask the official, the Deputy Secretary, do you have any statistics in which football match there are more than 50,000 spectators? Mr. McKinley has already said that he will provide supplementary paper on events with spectators more than 15,000 to 50,000, maybe horse racing. Would you wait for the paper? May I welcome Mr. Ma Fung Kwok? You also belong to the relevant constituency. Since you want to speak for the first round, I give you the floor, and then I will give the floor to members who are waiting for the second round. Mr. Ma. I am not a member of this committee, but I am rather concerned about this item. The proposals has been made, and there are discussions back and forth, and there were suggestions to relocate the MPSC, but the sports community asked for the speedy construction of the SMPSC in the Kai Tak. The present proposal is to provide funding to conduct a pre-built pre-construction study. The amount is not big. It is for consultancy study, for site investigation. It is expected that such tasks will be, or works will be completed in 2017, early 2017. Now, after the completion of the study, when will the construction of the MPSC formally begin? And is there any way to speed up the process so that it will be completed, say, before 2021 or 2020 or 2022? Whether it's a white elephant, the 50,000 seat main venue is not just for sports events, big sports events. It also can be a concert for concerts. We lack a large venue for concerts or other cultural and entertainment activities. I hope the venue will also be available for large-scale cultural events. The Deputy Secretary.
Ask my colleagues in the Architectural Services Department, first of all, to answer the point about the construction time following the completion of the pre-construction work that we're seeking funding for this morning.
Mr. Wong, please. Thank you, Chairman. Our application this time is to appoint consultants and contractors to conduct a pre-built study, pre-construction study, and to conduct a site investigation. With the support of the PWSC and with the approval of the FC, the advanced works will begin this year and will be completed in March 2017. Depending on the progress of the outcome of the study, if everything goes smoothly, we hope that we can start the construction works in 2017 with a view to completing the project in 2021. That's in the paper. My question is there any way to advance this? or to speed it up. From the point of view of my constituency, this is not very good. Of course, we want it to be faster. Therefore, we hope that we can get your support. Whether it can be advanced, it is still a very complicated project. We need a careful study, and we cannot lightly. We shouldn't do this study lightly. We have to follow the rules and procedures. My second question is this. The sports community wants such a big complex. The cultural sector, the entertainment sector also hope that there can be such a big complex. I don't know whether the administration has considered that.
Yes, the complex is primarily intended to be a sports complex, but of course some of the areas within the complex may indeed be suitable for use as entertainment, cultural exhibition, or other venues that are not directly related to sport. In terms of the usage generally, Chairman, if you just let me make one point again, and I'm sorry for repeating myself, but this complex is not just about a 50,000-seat main stadium. In fact, the majority of the facilities at this complex will be public sports facilities meeting a proven need in Hong Kong, where the usage rate for public sports grounds is 100%, where the usage rate for indoor sports venues regularly exceeds 90%, and we are simply short of the kind of public facilities that will be provided as the main component of this complex. Thank you.
Mr. Gary Fan. Chairman, my question is in relation to page 3, paragraph 5, the justifications. Community sports, promotion of elite sports are the objectives of the government. Can you explain to us how these three objectives can be achieved through this MPSC? In my constituency in Sai Kung Tseung Kwan O, there is a velodrome, the only velodrome in Hong Kong for elite cyclists in Hong Kong. This is for training of elite athletes. Only a small number of days the velodrome is open to the public, and people can only use a part of this velodrome park. I think it's only for the elite and not for community sports. If it is for community sports, they have in Europe they have facilities which are not big, they are not standardized, they are not international up to international standard, but they are dispersed in different communities so that people can make use of these sports facilities. Now, if you want to popularize sports, if your aim is sports for all, how can this MPSC achieve that objective of community sports or sports for all?
Thank you, Chairman. It's a very good question, and obviously it's something that we need to make sure that we do in planning a project of this nature. It has to be absolutely consonant with our policy objectives for sports development. I can only answer very, very briefly here, but would be happy to go into this in more detail at a panel meeting or separately. In terms of sports promotion, as I've said on a couple of occasions, one of the main issues that we face in promoting sport in the wider community is the shortage of venues for public recreation, public training, public competition or casual sports participation. Within the sports complex, we will provide a new public sports ground which will be primarily for public use, so it would be able to be used as, for example, the Hammer Hill Sports Ground is now, for public jogging, for public to book spaces for football matches, etc. So that would be a new public venue. The indoor facility, the indoor sports facility that will be part of the complex, again, primarily will be for use by the public. There will be 2 indoor arenas suitable for playing all sorts of indoor sports, whether they're racket sports such as badminton, table tennis, or martial arts sports, gymnastics, other sports of this nature. And also within the site there is scope for developing a number of outdoor facilities for sports such as beach volleyball, tennis. There will be a cycling track going through, there will be jogging tracks. So generally speaking, within that complex there will be a lot of facilities that will complement our efforts to promote sport more widely in the community. In terms of the elite sports development, clearly some of the higher level venues that will be provided at this complex will give athletes at the higher end of the performance spectrum new facilities in which to train, but will also allow them to take part in international events, more international events that we will bring to Hong Kong. Taking part in international events in your home city does give a major advantage to athletes, and it will allow more local Hong Kong athletes to take part in such international level competitions. Finally, in respect of the promotion of Hong Kong as a destination for major sports events, currently our infrastructure for such sports events is falling very much behind the standards that are expected in today's international competitive field. We have seen many other facilities opening around the region that are attracting these events. We are concerned that unless Hong Kong upgrades its sports infrastructure for such events, we will lose some of the major flagship international sports events that we currently have. So in this way, and this is just a very superficial explanation that I'm allowed, we are confident that this project will be consistent with our overall objectives for sports policy. Thank you.
Members, in front of me, I have Mr. K.K. Kwok, Dr. K.K. Kwok, Mr. Ma Fung Kwok, Mr. Albert Chen, who are waiting for the second round, and Mr. Wu Chi-wai is waiting for the third round. We only have 4 minutes before 10:30. I'm considering whether it's possible to extend the meeting until 11:15, and whether we will have enough time to put this proposal to the vote. 4 members, we may be able to barely reach this. Mr. Abraham Shack. Well, if they can answer all the questions by extending the meeting by a quarter of an hour, and then we can put it to the vote, then it will be. I think we should go ahead with that. We can't accommodate that within 15 minutes. All right. You have a motion under 32A. Okay. I have not received that. Well, it's not needed, Mr. Chairman. If a member objects, then I cannot extend the meeting according to the procedures of the PWSC. The Secretary has reminded that it is a decision by the majority. Well, then, let us have a show of hands. Those who are against extending the meeting by a quarter of an hour. Yes, those who are against the extension of the meeting by half an hour, by a quarter of an hour. A show of hands. 9 members is the majority. Well, the meeting is now adjourned. What is the date of the next meeting? 22nd.